So
you.
I have to say, Raquel, when I was looking at your bio, I saw that you had the honor of having to lead L'Oreal USA through the pandemic and
Yes.
being in charge of the global supply chain.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about how that was, and in particular, when you think about like figuring out sort of where you need to go with technology and getting ahead of things that could be shocking, how do you use technology to do that?
So someone earlier today said supply chain was the place that was crisis after crisis after crisis. And I can certainly relate to that. During COVID, it was like every morning you'd wake up and say, what now? What's next?
Right.
If you remember the boat that got trapped in the Seine River in Paris, I had 30% of our products on that boat.
Oh my Lord.
And so it was fun times. It was fun times. So thank you for having me. It's been great. This is my first conference. And to your question, as a supply chain leader, I'm now in transformation, but we had started a supply chain transformation 18 months before COVID hit. And that's always my aspiration as an operator. I have to be 18 to 24 months ahead of the hopes and dreams of my marketing friends, right? Because they expect change to happen very quickly. And we're talking about harvest, we're talking about buildings, infrastructure that has to be established. So we were investing in data before data was sexy. So 7 years ago, we hired a firm to come in and really assess what was happening at the PO level. And even though my CEO swore at the time that we were a retail-oriented company and 90% of our sales were coming from big B2B, so the Walmarts, the Targets, the Sephoras, and the Ultas, the data was dropping by 5% every year. And so we were actually down to like 72%.
Wow.
And that had dropped quickly in the last 2 years. And so I knew that this e-com thing was coming, and it was coming quickly. And during COVID, we achieved our 10-year ambition on e-com in 3 months.
Wow.
Because everyone was entertaining themselves, right? Like as you were at home, you were shopping online, you were creating new skincare regimens. And so because we had that data and had been crawling inside of our POs, and in fact, we were also inside of our customers' data, because there's Walmart.com, there's Target.com, we had that intel. So we could press the gas and press the brake in some other areas to really drive important results. We really won big. We were 2x the beauty market during COVID and beyond. And that's because of data and an investment in data to allow us to be ahead.
That's great. Yeah, like who ends up at the end of COVID having established record, right?
It's true.
Incredible.
It's true.
Very few companies
Yeah.
manage that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Joan, I was going to say for you, you have this kind of dual role where you are both clinical as well as driving transformation and using data, analytics, models, all this kind of stuff. Talk a little bit about the use of AI in healthcare and how you've seen that adopt over time, and in particular, kind of like how do you, start to bring that into an organization that has such a high level of care issues to deal with and regulatory issues?
Sure. I'm fortunate, I think, as a physician that I've had over 15 years of AI in healthcare. And that really came from work I did with Virtue Foundation, an NGO I helped build. And we built an AI platform to create the marketplace in low and middle income country healthcare and create visibility into that. And worked with our data science team and a lot of the major tech companies. So I feel very fortunate because it gave me insight and experience that most physicians never have. And I think that subject matter expert working with the actual data science teams is critical to building the actual product you need for your end use. And it's because of that work, really, that it unlocked the ability to do this work at Boston Children's around transformation. And I'm actually now the interim chief medical officer at Children's over the last 3 months or 2 months, so since I accepted this. And I love that because it's giving me even more opportunity, I think, to leverage the necessary transformation and AI integrations that have to happen. So I think to your question, the first thing we've seen is the usuals, right? Automation anywhere, in business processes, in some of the operational, in some of the supply chain. COVID was a great leapfrog for us because, similar to you, suddenly we had to stand up telehealth overnight, something that had been in like 2 years of committees and small portion of our business suddenly became all of our outpatient business. And I think you have to look at any challenging time as opportunity. And a lot of folks look at now as a challenge, which it is, but it's also the opportunity to build what needs to be built. And our key thing now is laying down our enterprise infrastructure for the data and the data and AI governance. I think those two pieces are what many big organizations are working with to then really drive the really key AI capabilities that we're all looking for to integrate into care processes and clinical use cases.
Right, and when we were talking before the event, we were kind of discussing this idea of how you really have to start in this very focused and narrowed way to get anything to get off the ground here. Do you have any additional thoughts about, how do you manage that in a way that doesn't slow things down?
Yeah, I think that you need to be building, and I think those use cases are great. We've certainly had plenty of those where you can show return on investment. I think to senior teams is important because you can start to get the buy-in. One thing that was really interesting for me, I just came back from speaking at the Databricks Data and AI Summit, and Jamie Dimon was there. I don't know if anybody in the room was at that summit, but Ali, the founder, interviewed him. I thought it was really strategic because AI guys can stand up all they want and say, you need this, you need this, you need this. The CEO is like, maybe. Yeah. Let me see what my board thinks. I'm not sure. Jamie Dimon goes up in a fireside and says, I took AI out of IT and I gave it a seat at my management committee. And anybody who knows JP Morgan knows that management committee is like, that's where God sits, right? So he's now sent a signal across the entire company of how important this is. And I think for the real transformations to happen, that's kind of what has to happen inside all of these large enterprises. Yep. And then he said, I want that person with me at every important decision that's being made for the overall company so that she can give me the view on where AI is important in this. Yep. And then he said, I sent all my key leaders on a plane to see Alibaba, Tencent, all these companies. And they looked at me like, why are we going there? He said, you go, and then when you come back, you tell me why I sent you. So I think there has to be, first, it has to come to the table. And second, you have to educate, like viscerally educate the senior management on why this is make or break to your business. Yeah. And it truly is, I believe, make or break to all our enterprises.
Yeah, I would love to build on that. I was having some conversations with some folks in the room, and particularly at the stages where many of you in this room are, you really want to follow where there is some visionary leadership. And where you are seeing offices of transformation being established. That's a signal of the openness of the leadership. It doesn't mean that they have figured it all out, by the way, but there is some vision that's happening that is open to medium, small, and large size innovations to allow them to get to the next phase. It's super important. If you look at the Fortune 500 or even Fortune 100 today versus what it was 5 years ago, that list is very different. And so it's a signal of those that were ahead with the puck and were in advance and predicting where it would go, and those that were following. So, and I'll give a shout out actually to L'Oreal in this regard, because we declared ourselves a beauty tech company 5 years ago. And you might not realize that we were the keynote for CES last year. We just signed a partnership with NVIDIA. We were acknowledged, this is hot off the press, as the #1 innovative company in tech in Europe. That's huge for a beauty company, right? You think of all the tech companies that are out there. So those are signals. Now, it doesn't mean that, we're ready to turn on a dime and we're ready to do business with everyone in this room. But those are the types of companies and partners that you really want to connect with.
So that's a good segue into some of the topic for our panel around agentic AI, which is, of course, just all that people want to talk about at this point. How are you guys starting to think about that? And how are you thinking about laying the foundation so that you're ready to really adopt that more broadly within the organization?
Well, again, going back to my dual use, right? I think with Virtue Foundation, our VF Match platform, it's more startup mentality, smaller teams. So agentic is already embedded into our workflows for classifiers, for key information extraction, for as a judge, and it's easy. When you're in a large enterprise, it's much harder to run that across your entire platform. But again, I feel fortunate. I have some experience with it, and we're using it more in use case basis across the organization. So people can start to see how it's helping. So we're using it, say, in creation of medical notes, right? You can start to use an agent to pull the key information that you need to go into those notes. In use cases of that nature, so we can start showing its value while we're getting the other, I think, the enterprise architecture and the governance really locked down in a way that the entire organization is comfortable with. I think many organizations I talk to, that's the level at which they're bringing in agentic when it's a large enterprise, a very well-established enterprise. But the use cases are, I think this is going to become something of tremendous value. You can just see what it's going to do.
Yeah. Pilots are key, right? There is still a level of uncertainty around this technology and what does it mean. So pilots are good. We have it all across the company, whether that's in marketing, helping us with actual assets and personalized marketing to our consumers, in our research and innovation, where we're bringing together physical AI and Gen AI. We have hundreds of thousands of biomarkers that are telling us the age of your skin, the age of your hair, every strand of your hair. And then allowing you put those two things together, right? And we can really create a very personalized and impactful experience with our brands. So you have that part of it. Then we have operationally, of course, in the infrastructure, in our HR systems, in our financial systems, across manufacturing and operations. So, but they're pilots. They are pilots, and pilots are good because also from a scale, it allows us to learn, to iterate, to adjust, and keep going. So, but we're creating, importantly, environments where we can play and we can experiment, which is fundamental.
And that, I assume, helps people in your teams feel bought in some ways to this rather than maybe threatened by it.
Yeah, which is the other side of it, which is the people side of change. It's so important. And we're coming at that in two phases. Actually making project implementation and project management as important as product launches. I mean, when you step back and you think about all the work that we do with consumer panels and customer engagement strategies, but we weren't doing nearly enough of that when you're implementing a project or a new technology or a new capability in-house. So that people side of change is super important. And then formally embracing change management as a capability.
Yes, I was going to just second that. I think if I look at Boston Children's, we have our IDHA Innovation and Digital Health Accelerator. So it's a way for, I think, companies to engage in and also internally help us build out these use cases across the organization, and then creating learning communities. So the same way I gave the example of, Jamie Dimon sending off his senior exec team, you need to find ways for people on the ground to feel comfortable with this new technology.
Yeah.
To start understanding how it's actually going to help their workflows, have them bring use cases forward, and then find those really early adopters to champion it, and then learn from each other. So instead of staying in your silos, which every organization has, try to get that across silo sharing of learnings. And I think that has also helped with accelerating things quite a lot.
That's awesome. All right. Well, I have a million questions, but I think I'll open it up to the audience and just take some more. And if not, I have additional ones. Can I open it up for anyone who has a question?
Hi. This question is for Joan. So in the healthcare industry, adoption of new technologies is usually considered more of a laggard than a lead, probably for obvious reasons. You want to test it. At what point do you see AI or any form of artificial intelligence being adopted in the clinical side of the business, when doctors are, interacting with patients and using AI to assist or?
Absolutely. I think we are, because we're regulated, right? So aren't the financial markets. We're regulated, so there's always concern. And probably more important than your wallet is your life, right? So people are concerned about how do you introduce things. But we already are introducing this into things like image analysis. We've had folks develop algorithms to be able to be predictive around child abuse injury on X-ray. We are integrating things. We have predictive models in our ICU to help predict clinical crisis. So we are starting to introduce things more in sort of use case bases rather than, say, across the entire org. We're also piloting a lot of, audio, voice to note, so that patients can have more face time with a clinician. So we are bringing in all kinds of tools, even into the clinical space. I think the first space, the easiest part, was on the business side because there's no risk. But we are now actually beginning to utilize these things in the clinical space. You can see the direction of travel. It's not an if, it's a when. And then finding the ways to do that safely for patients. And I think with the speed of the way things are going, it's not going to be as glacial as it was in the past. I think it's going to be that Kurzweil's, it's like slow, 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 and then everyone's going to change. Because the demand is there from the consumer, in terms of healthcare, to the abilities to be able to bring new treatments, potentials for new ways of caring, connected care, care at home, all of these things we are developing our capabilities for, because that's the direction of travel. And we want to be able to, a place like Boston Children's, we want to be able to offer that level of care and the knowledge we have, right? We're sitting on incredible knowledge to a broader population of children. And I think in a more personalized way. So I think it's a when, not if.
I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions.
Hi, Brad Behrens, Center for the Digital Future, advisor here. Raquel, this question is for you. You said something really, really intriguing, which was that you have to be 18 to 24 months ahead of marketing. Could you zoom in on that? Because A, what does that mean? And B, in my experience, marketing is usually 18 to 24 months behind everybody else. So how are you getting there?
Maybe that's why we're number one in beauty. I don't know.
Yeah.
No, so you think about a new product or a new concept or a new habit that we want to introduce to the consumer. And so as soon as there is consumer data that suggests this is a winner, this is a winning proposition, there's an expectation. I'll use the example that I shared on COVID. So we went into lockdown. Now, this was not necessarily our marketing friends, but they were strategizing with Walmart and Target, and actually Sephora was really coming into the space on offering ship to consumer direct home, but wanted to offer a specific set of SKUs, a broader portfolio of SKUs. And you see that now, it's commonplace now, right? When you shop online, you have a broader assortment of SKUs, but back then that was new. So you had your power SKUs that were available every day in the store, but then they wanted to have these special bundles and that would create a new regiment between skin and makeup. And so as soon as they came up with that idea and they tested it, they wanted me to turn and be ready and start to ship it like in a month. And so we have to procure, right? So they had, of course, the special features and the special ingredients. And so if you have not already put in place the supply chain, the that allows us to store inventory of specialty raw materials. So if you all are Kiehl's, any Kiehl's users there's this product called calendula flowers, these lovely things that literally flowers running inside of the plant operation, but they have incredible efficacy and features to offer to your skin. So they wanted to feature this overnight. So I had to already have the ability to, impact the harvest, to have inventory deployed in the right locations. There are certain parts around the country where this was more attractive than others. So these are the things that we already have to have some infrastructure in place. And if we haven't begun to think about some of these milestones, then it can take 2 to 3 years before you can get them set up. And particularly in beauty, it's emotional, right? So again, you don't need another fragrance, right? But you want it.
You want it.
So, but we have to capitalize on that and be ready to move. So if it takes me 2 to 3 years to get it set up, that doesn't work, right? We've missed the opportunity.
Thank
Sure.
you both for being
Thank
so
you.
terrific.
Thank you.